But first today, a major milestone. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese reveals the referendum question for the voice to Parliament. He also confirms an Indigenous voice to Parliament will advise executive and government and federal Parliament if the referendum is successful later this year. The Prime Minister, standing alongside the referendum working group, broke down with emotion as he said what this moment means to him.
This moment has been a very long time in the making, yet they have shown such patience and optimism through this process. And that spirit of cooperation and thoughtful, respectful dialogue has been so important at arriving at this point in such a united fashion. Are there any circumstances in which this will not be put to a vote? The answer to that is no. Because to not put this to a vote to not put this to a vote is to concede defeat. You only win when you run on the field and engage. And let me tell you, my government is engaged.
Albanese made the case that a voice to Parliament and recognition in the Constitution will help fix Indigenous disadvantage, that it would provide a way for Indigenous Australians to give advice to government on issues that matter to them. The final question, which will be put to voters later this year, is this: a proposed law to alter the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve of this proposed alteration? Under this proposed design, the body will give advice to the Parliament and government, meaning both the ministers and the public service. The members of the voice would serve for a fixed period of time and they'd be chosen by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. This proposed design of the voice will allow the body to give independent advice to the Parliament, and legislation for the voice will go to the Parliament next Thursday with a vote scheduled for June. Albanese says he hopes there'll be bipartisan support, at least for the referendum.
I'm hoping for a unanimous support when the referendum's held. That's my starting point, but I think that's a bit ambitious.
Leading No campaigners Jacinta Price and Warren Mundine argue that the voice would cost millions of dollars but wouldn't lead to tangible change on the ground. They say this would just be another layer of bureaucracy, and they say it would trample on the voices of Indigenous people while only representing the elite.
Those whose first language is not English, those who still live by customary law, were here in Parliament and travelled because they wanted to be heard. They wanted their voices to be heard. They wanted Australians, they wanted the Prime Minister and the government to know that no, not all Aboriginal people agree with the elite's voice to Parliament. These are grassroots people. I've said so from the get-go. Our position remains to say no to the voice going forward.
Well, responding to these criticisms, Indigenous academic Marcia Langton today said there was no evidence that previous bodies that had tried to improve Indigenous outcomes didn't work. She claimed that politicians hadn't taken up the recommendations from these bodies.
And in each case, we have doggedly recommended changes to stop the deaths, the incarceration, the early deaths and the miserable lives, and it is so infrequently that our recommendations are adopted.
The coalition says Labor needs to show what the voice will do, how it will change lives on the ground. Peter Dutton questions whether it would deliver practical outcomes.
Now, the Liberal Party's been consistent also from day one in saying that we want to contemplate and consider what it is the government's putting forward. I want to reiterate today that that process doesn't change with the announcement of the Prime Minister's words. There's obviously already been some question marks around the words that have been proposed now. This is the third set of words that the Prime Minister's put. I think it's absolutely essential that the Prime Minister releases the Solicitor General's advice. From what we've read in media reports, the Solicitor General has concerns about these very words.
If Peter Dutton holds out from joining the Yes campaign and if the referendum fails ultimately, Labor will surely blame him. But the question is, has Albanese been too ambitious with his chosen model? Would fighting only for recognition in the Constitution have led to a more certain yes answer in a referendum, rather than trying to also convince Australians to accept a body that advises both the public service and the government? Some legal experts are concerned that this will mean another layer of bureaucracy, but more importantly, they're worried that there might be the potential for legal challenges, even in the High Court. And this is a question Kieran Gilbert asked the Prime Minister today.
On issues like, does the Voice make representations to public servants? Do public servants have to give notice to the Voice when they make decisions pertaining to Aboriginal Australians? Maybe the attorney wants to say something, but your chance to reassure them, because I know that there are a lot of people who strongly want this to happen but have legal questions about that specific reference.
The Referendum Working Group also had a legal team of the best legal minds in the country have worked on this. And if you look at the tweaking of some of the words, it's based upon advice, making it very clear about the primacy of the Parliament